The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Reproduction or dissemination, other than for the purpose of education or information without the express written permission of the Phoenix Research Institute or Nova Society Media, is strictly prohibited.
Welcome back to the Nova Society. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with my panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Bound. Today we will be answering listener emails, and we have a question from Tony, who lives in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Tony asks, Trump seems fixated on Fed Chair Powell and Harvard University. Why? I know what he says, but I'm wondering if there's something more under the surface.
So, you know what? I know Trump went to the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School of Business. Whether he was actually qualified to go there, one of those questions about him seems possible that he, faked his way in with somebody else taking the SATs for him and so on and so forth. There's all kinds of rumors about stuff like that. But one of the facts about Trump that those of us who live in New York have always known is that being a real estate developer from Queens, he always wanted to play with the big boys in Manhattan and always felt that he was looked down upon by the big time realtors in Manhattan and the business community in Manhattan, and always really tried to strive to be one of them, but never felt accepted. And it's certainly possible that Trump really should have stayed at Fordham, and that was where he belonged. He went into the Ivy League and apparently didn't do that well. One of his professors said that he remembers Trump as being one of the worst students he's ever had. As somebody who's had thousands and thousands of students, I don't know that I would be able to remember who the worst student that I've ever had was. But he has really gone to great lengths to try to justify being in a position where he's one of the elites, and has always had this sort of outer borough loser mentality. So I think that may explain why he's gone after the Ivy Leagues and Harvard in particular. Not, again, 100% sure. He seems to have carved out MIT from that because he has like an uncle who went there. But as far as Powell is concerned, he appointed Powell, and over the last few days, if it was Scott Bessent or somebody else who's gotten to him and said, look, you know what, you can't keep doing this to the economy. You got to stop. You got to stop talking about Powell. Stop talking about firing him. Stop talking about your tariffs. The tariffs are way too high. They're astronomical compared to what they need to be, what they should be. And of course, and he sees the stock market goes up, and that gives positive reinforcement. So he may leave Jay Powell alone for now, and backtrack on some of the tariffs, and backtrack on his apparently 40-year dream of changing the way that the world does trading, and hopefully things sort of level out and we can have a decent economy without going into a recession, and growth continues. If Trump said, we're going to go back to the economic policies of Joe Biden, that the stock market would respond favorably, the world would respond favorably, the economy would respond favorably, and the whole thing would maybe just go away. He's not the kind of guy who admits that he's wrong very often, so I'm not sure that we're ever going to quite get there. But certainly his adventurism in this field, in this endeavor, has not worked out well for any of us. And I think he might be sensitive to that, at least as far as his legacy is concerned.
Yeah. And I'll just kind of go on to that part about Trump being going into the Ivy League and attacking Ivy League schools. And of course, it's all about DEI and it's all about, those kind of things. But I think it also relates to why he's on about Powell. And I think Scott's onto something there. Whether you agree with Powell or not, he has seemed to manage the Fed fairly well. He's actually done a fairly good job, even now in this time of turmoil. If there's one thing we've noticed about Trump, when he puts people into positions in his cabinet, he seems to find the most unqualified bungler that he can find, probably to make himself feel better. I mean, there's something there that makes you do that. Powell is competent. Probably will forget more about economics than Trump will ever know in his entire life. And I think that really that's a challenge to Trump. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's attacking. Powell is not sitting back saying, oh, yeah, tariff is my favorite word in the entire English language. He's not doing that. He's basically telling exactly what an economist, somebody that's the head of the Fed, along with all the other, people in the Fed are saying, this is a bad idea. And they're putting up the warning signs. And yeah, that's a threat to Trump. And that's the problem. And I think it's because, just saying to your base, oh, tariffs is the most beautiful word in the English language, and then having somebody who's truly knows about economics come out and say, this is a bad idea. This doesn't work. That's a huge threat. And that it knocks Trump down a peg. So, of course, the only thing he can do is he can attack. Same thing with Harvard. Harvard basically coming out to him and saying, no, we're not doing that. Go away. That's a direct threat to the authoritarian. And I give Harvard a lot of credit for doing it. I wish Columbia had done it. I wish, all universities should stand up. I was in a meeting with a university that I teach for, and they were talking about, they've always been for the past, 10 years, big on, DEI and inclusion and things like this. And now they're saying, the present political climate may have, we may have to tone that down a little bit. And my comment is if that's one of your core values, and now you're saying just because of politics, it was a bad idea, maybe you weren't so invested in that core value in the first place. If it's a core value that you believed in 10 years ago, maybe you should still be believing in it today, regardless of what the politics say. Unless you've gone back and you've looked at it and said, no, that was a totally bad idea. But you're not doing it because it was a totally bad idea. You're not even thinking about it in those kind of terms. You're thinking about it in the terms of, well, how can this impact us? And the only way is to be like Harvard. And I know there's not a lot of schools like Harvard that have a $62 billion war chest that they can go back to and fight this. But the fact is that, hey, I give them all the credit in the world for suing. And what they were saying was very true. Trump's administration, again, not shooting straight, said, well, they weren't supposed to receive that letter that they received. No, that was wrong. I don't know. Went through the hands of 3 high-level members of the administration and these guys. So it just shows you the chaos. And again, I think that's why he's focused on it, because all of these moves make him look bad. It makes them look like they're incompetent, which is the exact thing they are, incompetent. So that would be my take on that one.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. The other day, might have even been yesterday, who knows, the days are weird. A Fox News host had on a congressman, Democratic Congressman Frost, and apparently was taken by surprise when Frost said that Trump had discussed putting homegrowns in El Salvador. Did you see this clip? It's a fascinating clip because the host says, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Do you have any proof of that? And then he says, I'm talking to the producer in my ear right now. We need to get a clip of that. And Frost said, go on Google and just put in Trump and homegrowns and you'll see the clip. And he hadn't seen it, apparently. And it's an amazing thing because even Fox News hosts are getting caught up in the Fox News craziness. They're suppressing actual things that are going on in the administration because they don't want their viewers to know about it. And this guy who works for the network, who's a host of one of their shows, was totally ignorant of the fact that this even happened. And there's so much. I think that Trump himself is often a victim of the information sources that he's allowing himself to see, that he's insulated from reality. And somebody had to come to him with this Jay Powell stuff and the China tariff stuff and say to him, look, you're roiling the markets. And he was like, oh, I thought the markets were doing great. I thought everything was fine. And they're like, no, everything is terrible. You're destroying the global economy. And he's backed off from it. And he'll have to figure out some way to save face. And we should all give him the space to do that, because Lord knows what'll happen if he doesn't have it. And but he's, does seem so often to be a victim of his own information sources and reliance on rumors and conspiracy theories and all kinds of stuff like that. It's just an amazing thing. But Powell's not going to allow himself to get backed into a corner and start cutting rates at a time when inflation might start going up again. And then he's got nothing to do one way or another with it, So I think that this is going to be an ongoing thing between Powell and Trump, that this isn't over yet. But I do think that somebody has gotten to Trump, and it's green on the screen today. So, all good. I guess we can be grateful for that.
As I understand it, it was CEOs from huge companies like Walmart, and I'm not sure what other. I think it was Axios, and 3 companies were named. The only one I can remember is Walmart, who said to Trump, "You're going to find empty shelves if you keep this up. Yeah. Not only are prices going to be beyond astronomical, but there won't be anything on the shelves." And that got Trump's little half cell, whatever he's got anyway, to at least give a little spark of electricity in there somewhere, and he finally understood something. I want to make one point about the bond market. I had always thought that the People's Republic of China held the most American debt in the form of American bonds, American dollars, and so forth. Apparently, they are number 2. Japan holds the most American debt, and then China. And when the bond market just recently, when, as you said, Scott, the days are very strange. When the bond market was not responding the way that Trump had anticipated, and I guess other people had anticipated, someone was trying to sell U.S. bonds, and as far as my understanding goes, it was the Japanese government trying to sell them and being unable to do so. Yeah.
So I think we discussed this on this podcast, if I'm not mistaken, but just in case we didn't, it was apparently Canada's new Prime Minister Carney who put together this sort of coalition of other leaders, other world leaders, to send a message to Trump that they were going to sell off their bonds. And Canada, when he first came in, Carney, Canada bought a great deal of bonds, apparently only to have them to sell them when they needed to. The Canadian Prime Minister Carney is an economist. I believe he went to Harvard. And what he wanted to do was send a message to Trump, which I think Trump got, and that they didn't involve China in this at all. But if China and Japan were to sell off all their bonds, our entire monetary system would fall apart.
Making America great again.
Yeah, I had not realized that about Carney. Thank you. I mean, I knew he was an economist because I'd made that mistake No, I made the mistake with Claudia Scheinbaum, thinking she was an economist and not a physicist. But I knew Carney he managed the Bank of England at one time. And no, I hadn't realized that he had bought bonds, and he was the one selling. Or did he sell them, or did he threaten to sell them?
No, there was a concerted effort of selling off.
Okay.
And that created a craziness in the bond market, which usually goes up when the stock market goes down. And this was like they were both down at the same time.
Right.
And that was a message that at least Scott Bessent got. And has gone, as you said before, with these CEOs also, and gone to Trump to get to him to say, you can't keep messing around like this. So
okay.
Yeah.
I missed that story. Okay. Thank you. I said that somebody was selling U.S. bonds, and I had not understood that. Again, I'd seen that Carney had sent a very strong message, but I did not follow that story. So that's what he did. Okay. Well, good for him. I mean, something has to get through, and also stop this 51st state nonsense.
Which he did right away, right? Trump has not mentioned that since Carney has been in office, and I think that Carney has made it clear that he's going to oppose him, and he knows how to do it.
Yep. What I have heard is, I think it was again on Axios, but I'm not sure, is that privately, while publicly Trump has said he's not going to fire Powell, privately he is talking about ways to do that. And of course that would be absolutely disastrous if he did. Have you heard anything about that, or is that just something
I can only see what's in the newspapers and stuff like that. I'm not an insider in the Trump administration, but from what I understand, he's backed off on his, at least publicly, right, and made the markets go up. But that he holds, he has his resentment over the fact that Powell won't do what he says that Trump demands that he do, which is lower interest rates. He wants to get back to what Obama had, basically, which was like 0% interest rates, where banks could borrow money for no reason and loan it out to people at a great profit. And that was what caused the Obama recovery. It was a slow one, but it was one of the things that they had to do after the 2008 crash to get the economy back going. Trump wants them to do that, but they've raised interest rates in the interim. Of course, Powell raised them drastically, I think, or slowly but steadily anyway, during the Biden administration to combat inflation. And everybody felt, if you remember, that raising the rates was going to cause a recession. They kept predicting that we're going to have a Biden recession, and the economy just kept going. And Powell was not able to destroy the economy, but he was able to combat inflation, or other factors combated inflation, like the supply chains getting cleared up and so on. So interest rates are currently right above 5%, I think. And Trump wants them back down to zero again during the campaign, said that he believed that he should replace Powell as the Fed chair because he knows more about economics than Powell does, or any other Fed chair that we've had in history, right? This is typical bluster on the part of Trump. Clearly, he doesn't understand anything about the economy, but that's what he wants to do. And whether he's going to do it or not, I guess, remains to be seen. It's probably also, I haven't looked at it in a while, but I'm sure that Project 2025 calls for the destruction of the Federal Reserve.
Trump knows everything about everything. He's the best at everything, and now you see where it got you. So
yeah, it's like if Dunning-Kruger could walk, it'd be Trump.
This is exactly right.
Also, Peyronie's disease. but that's neither here nor there.
No. Well, hopefully we answered that.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate the question very much. And, well, we will see what happens going forward. But yes, thank you for the question. And I do hope that we answered it. And thank you to everyone for listening to us on the Nova Society. Take care, stay safe, and we'll see you again next time.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or a comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Phoenix Research Group, an independent research consortium offering social political issue solutions to NGOs and international government agencies through multidisciplinary, nonpartisan, and unbiased research. The Phoenix Research Group is a division of the Phoenix Research Institute, the producer of the Nova Society podcast.